Just below the buttes of the fertile Smoky Valley in central Kansas lies the Swedish-American community of Lindsborg. One of the first needs of the area's early settlers was for a mill to saw trees into lumber for their houses and to grind the grain they produced into flour. The community's first water-powered mill was built on the banks of the Smoky Hill River by Charles Johnson, an immigrant carpenter. Miller Johnson, as he was called, built a wooden structure housing 2 grinding stones and a sawmill in 1872. By 1889, the mill had been converted to the modern roller process. That same year, it was leased to Theodore Tyscraper, and for most of the next 2 decades, the name Tyscraper became synonymous with milling in Lindsborg. Tyscraper was as popular in the town as he was successful as a miller. In the process of running a busy mill, Tyscraper was often locked in struggles which pitted his efforts against those of nature, facing both flood and fire. In fact, the current Smoky Valley roller mill rose out of the ashes of a disastrous fire in 1897. After Tyscraper's death in 1907, the mill passed through several hands until in 1955, facing competition from larger mills, the wheels and endless belts of the mill turned no more. For many years, the once essential mill stood dark and silent. Windows were broken, belts deteriorated, and the history told in the wood and machines began to decay. However, a man named Malcolm Esping held fast to a dream. He was convinced that the seemingly impossible task of a complete restoration was both possible and desirable. Without the help of numerous individuals and organizations, completion of the project would have been impossible. Finally, after years of effort, the project was completed, and on April 1st, 1981, grain again passed through the Pioneer Mill on its journey to become the staff of life.
This mill here is the granddaddy of the modern mill, and I'm talking the gradual reduction process, where you go ahead and use steel roller mills to reduce the grain by a breaking system and a middling system, then to go ahead and reduce it into flour.
The beginning of the milling process begins with power. It is believed that the original Lindsborg mill was powered by water turbines rather than by an overshot or undershot wheel, which were often used with grist mills that used burr stones for grinding. The current mill was water-powered by 2 turbine engines. Later, a steam engine was installed for auxiliary power and was eventually replaced with an electric motor. This 150-horsepower motor powers the main line shaft. This shaft drives all the machinery of the mill through a seemingly endless series of pulleys, cogs, chains, and leather belts. The journey of grain through the mill also begins in the basement. From the mill's elevators, grain was moved into the basement and then augured from a storage bin to the boot, or beginning, of the 5th of the mill's 24 elevator legs. Cups attached to cotton belting transport the wheat to the 3rd floor. Here it undergoes a thorough cleaning process to remove chaff and other foreign matter in 3 machines, the cyclone duster and the horizontal and upright scourers. After the cleaning process, a small amount of water is sprinkled on the grain. This tempering, as it is called, loosens the bran and softens the inside of the kernel. The tempered grain returns to the basement, where it is again picked up and transported to the first of 6 double stands of roller mills, or breaks, on the 1st floor. Inside each break are either 2 corrugated or smooth rollers. Turning at slightly different speeds against each other, these rollers each perform a step in the gradual reduction process of turning wheat into flour. The corrugated breaks cut the kernels of wheat into small pieces. Then the smooth rollers grind the stalk into particles of ever-decreasing size. From the breaks on the 1st floor, the product drops to the basement, where it is picked up in one of the elevator legs and brought to the peak of the roof on the 3rd floor. Here it is discharged from the elevator leg to a hollow chute, which brings the cut grain to the first of 3 sifters located on this floor. These sifters have a series of 60 sieves through which the product must eventually pass. These range from wire screen in the first sifter to a very fine silk mesh in the final stage. When the mill is in operation, the powerful movements of these machines cause the entire mill building to tremble. Stock, which is too large to pass through the final sieve, is returned to the roller mills on the first floor for a repetition of the reduction and sifting process. Several times during the grain's transition to flour, it moves to the second floor where it is purified. The stock passes through a bran duster where the bran is removed. This allows the mill to make two types of flour: high patent or regular white flour, and clear flour which contains small quantities of bran. This mill cannot produce a whole wheat flour. The middlings then pass through a series of 3 purifiers. Middlings is the term for the stages between whole grain and finished flour. Purifiers are used to remove the fluffy, fibrous material from these middlings, making possible a cleaner, more perfect flour. Sock dusters, large multi-spoked wheels above the purifiers, collect the dust from the middlings in its numerous filters or socks. This dust is then knocked out of the socks, stored, and eventually sold as animal feed. The sock duster also helps to control the amount of flour dust in the air and prevent dust explosions. Then, after being cut and ground, sifted and shaken, and transported from basement to eaves time and time again, the flour goes through one final sifting in the rebolt reels on the 3rd floor. The flour is then stored on the 2nd floor, awaiting its packaging on the floor below. Once started, it would take this mill approximately 20 minutes to turn the grain into flour. With a capacity of 35 bushels per hour, it produced 15 100-pound sacks of flour in that time. It was once said that half the bread in Denver was made from Kansas wheat and flour. This mill, while small by modern standards, played its part in spreading the wealth of the plains around the country and around the world. And, in its restored state, the Smoky Valley Roller Mill stands as a monument to the pioneers of this central Kansas town, and with its gleaming wood and paint, it shines in tribute to the many volunteers who, with their years of sweat and toil, made reality of a dream.